Hi, I'm Mike Volpi with Index Ventures, and welcome to Candid with Index. Today, I'm honored to be joined by Augusto Marietti. Those of us that know him, he's Aghi, the founder and CEO of Kong.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
It's a pleasure to have you. Okay, I want to start with a few questions that will take you back a little ways in time. You are originally from Italy, Roman. I'm Milanese, of course, from Milan, which is a much better city, but we can get to that a little bit later.
Point of view, yeah.
Of course, at some point, you made a big decision to move from Italy to the United States with your company. What was the hardest part about making that move to the United States? And are there any aspects of Italy that you still miss?
The hardest parts, other than going through immigration, it was really getting settled in this new world that you didn't know anything about and barely speaking English. The basic things that people take for granted, like the social security number, right? You need to enter into a system that is not yours. So you get into this massive chicken egg situation where you learn and trying to figure it out, and you spend actually a lot of time rather than building the business and be customer in figure it out the life system to get into it, and it's a lot of your time. So that was, I think, the thing that I remember the most, learning how this country works and what you need to do, and other than obviously a lot of economical challenges, but that was what I remember, that things work very differently here.
I want to ask you about your family. Within your family, and as you know, all of us Italians have very close relationships with our different family members, but who is most influential for you now as an adult in your family, and why?
Well, I would say a lot goes back actually to childhood. What I learned from my parents is that the world is divided between artists and scientists. And my mom was poor artist, and my dad was poor scientist. In fact, they didn't last long together for long periods. But I learned from looking at the lenses of the world in these two dimensions, and I brought it all through the life. When you build teams, you talk with customers. It's always about figuring out if you're talking with an artist or a scientist, because they make decisions differently. Right? Like a scientist makes decision with the brain, an artist makes decision with the heart. Artists are qualitative, usually based, while scientists are quantitative based.
So you said scientist and artist. Which one are you?
Mainly artist. Yeah, I think 70% artist. If it wasn't that I didn't study economics in college, I would have been full artist. But that economics degree brought me some science.
It made you a little bit sciencey.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. So you mentioned this, but you and your partner Marco, you started Kong, which back then was called Mashape, in 2010 in Italy.
Yeah.
And my guess is at the time there weren't that many people that really understood APIs and API gateways and microservices in Italy. So you decided to move to San Francisco. Tell us about that story. How did you make that decision? What happened in the early days in Italy, and what was the transition to the US like?
Yeah, so I moved out of Rome when I was 18, and I went to Milan to study economics. And I met Marco through a childhood common friends. And together we started another company which is called Membox, which was a password storage manager. So didn't go anywhere. But from that we were starting to work with APIs. So we decided to build MeshApps in a garage in Italy. So the only startup garage in Italy kind of thing. And we started coding this prototype so if you remember 10 years ago, APIs were used as a mesh-up mechanism to do things like Google Maps meshing out with Yahoo weather information, and you put everything together. It was not a big business thing. And so we built a platform called MeshApps in the garage in Italy, which was about meshing apps, which just evolved into MeshApe Inc., which I opened it from Rome online. And that's how MeshApe really started, to build a platform for finding and discovering and consuming their APIs, and those were very early days, right? So there weren't many, but they were starting to grow month over month, more and more interface that people could combine. So that was really the original idea, and and riding the wave of APIs starting back then.
Was there a moment that made you guys decide that you were going to move to the US? Did you always start thinking you were going to move, or was there an event that said, okay, we got to move now?
Well, so we started build this prototype, and we went up and down in Italy for a year to get some seed funding and angel funding. And I remember that the investors there, they did not really understand what an API is or what they. It was more like investing in different kind of business like fashion, but we were so down into the low level of engineering that we couldn't even have a decent conversation. And also the major blocker though was, well, you're only 19 years old, right? Like okay, we give you this money, and then what are you gonna do? Are you gonna go in California, in Los Angeles, and spend them all? So that was like the common sense. Like, you're 19 years old, like you don't know what you're doing. Which, I mean, not that now I do, but but back then the thing is, like, this is like 19 years old kids. We're giving them money. They're going to California. We're never gonna see them again. They're gonna go in Malibu. And so that was the common thing. And so they start to ask us for like 45 pages business plan. And I said, look, we don't even have a customer. I can tell you what it's going to be, but I tell you API is going to be big.
Then Mashape comes to the United States, and it's an interesting ride in the first few years. You raise some money.
Yeah.
A lot of developers love the product. Little more challenging to monetize it and to construct a business of it. And sort of you came to the point that Mashape, as the way that it was envisioned, wasn't the right way to build a business for it. In fact, I actually remember that we had a particular board meeting. I think it was still at our offices in Index, where we talked through the possibilities of how you could transform or potentially pivot Mashape. And that's how Kong is born, of course. Talk to us about how you came to the decision that you needed to do something different, and what kind of gave you the courage and the resilience to try something new rather than say, okay, I'm done, this didn't work out, let's sell this thing to somebody and move on.
I think that's you learn as an entrepreneur, right? That not all the metrics matters, but Mashape was growing good on community metrics. Like, we were adding 10,000 new developers per month that were going to publish long tail APIs and consuming. So the community had momentum, 300,000 developers. The monetization, it wasn't quite effective, even if the vision was right. So at that point, we look around various options, and one option was, well, keep doing what you're doing and just keep improving it. The other one is looking at what you built across the years to run this marketplace and see what you can spin it off as a single solution. Mm-hmm. And the third one was to sell the thing or do totally complete difference. The other two, they never eat our brain as a founder, because we still have a strong belief that API was the wave. It was just a matter how we capture it, but that was a massive secular trend. And the second thing, selling the thing, was like, well, we came all the way here. We said bye-bye to everybody. We went through a lot of dark times, and to come back to Malpensa and Milan and say that we failed, it's like, no way. It's like, we cannot come back like as a miserable man. Like, we're gonna be here and keep going no matter what. And so the option was really like, keep building what you're doing or looking at what we did. And then it turned out that we created, we call it, I sent an email to the company, call it the Renaissance era, where we start to experiment a bunch of stuff and see what sticks. And one of those then eventually turned out to be Kong. And then that was, we went to the Index office, figured out what to do. And we were also very short on cash back then. And so there wasn't much runway to figure it out, to make this thing work. So I think a lot of courage, a lot of luck, a lot of good timing.
When you made the decision to center in on Kong as your future strategy, you had Mashape, you had a series of experiments that you ran to figure out what different things were going on. You settled on Kong. In your heart, how much certainty did you have that was the right direction? Like, did you really know, or was like, I don't know, let's just try this? You know, how did it feel inside?
So going back to the way, we have still had the conviction that APIs were going to be massive. And when we decided to spin off Kong as a standalone technology, we decided to make it open source, because that was the best way to get feedback and distribution as fast as we can. And it took off right away in terms of community. developers started to use it. So half of me was like, yes, we got it. But the other half of me said, wait a second, this could be like Mashape. We get the community adoption, but then it's not easy to monetize. But that thing only lasts 6 months, because then we got a call from Obamacare, from healthcare.gov, and say, hey, we're using Kong in production to work with TurboTax, and we would like to have a commercial relationship with you. And then on the phone, we sold the first Kong enterprise contract for more money than what we ever made it in Mashape 5 years before, with a higher margin than whatever ever Mashape had in 5 years. And then I think I remember I even brought the check. I showed the check to you, to the board, and it's like, this is the business. We found this. Like, we got our gold mine ticket. And then all the thing, okay, this is the one. And then we had to sell Mashape asset to another company so we could focus to create an enterprise company.
And once you made that pivot, did you have to do a lot of big changes inside your company? Management team, key employees, trajectory of the business overall, strategic elements? Like, what were aside from the decision, of course, what were all the other things that you had to do to make this pivot work?
Yeah, I think the team came after the product market fit of the Kong, and the first thing was, well, we were basically, back then we were like only 20 people, flat organization. Like, I had 20 reports, so it was I think we were coming to this board meeting and we had nothing to talk about it. So the only thing I could do is cooking Mike a good carbonara, and at least I could keep him busy during the board meeting. So
it was actually quite good. So we were looking for more frequent board meetings.
So I remember it's like we're like in the kitchen. It's like Marco's like, well, we have board meeting next week. What are we gonna talk about? We have no revenue, no business, no customer. Well, maybe we should just cook them a good carbonara. That sounds like a good idea. So boom, we got a carbonara. Everybody was happy. But after that pivot, the business started to get few customers. I think the first thing was hiring sales, and after that was really okay. We cannot scale with 20 direct reports, so you have to build the teams and leadership and pivot from like an hacker developer company to really an enterprise company. And so that was years in the making, but those are like the first things, like hiring the first vice presidents and make sure that you start to give up a lot of your Lego, and those are the key few things that I tagged.
Okay, so now if we fast forward to today, Kong is the world's most popular API and microservices gateway, most broadly used. The product has had enormous success, but you and Marco have always had a strong sense of maintaining kind of your humility. And in fact, it's interesting because I think at every year, it's either at SKO or the company kickoff, you give a presentation about Kong's history to explain to the employees the darker and more difficult days. Can you share with us why do you do that, and what is it that shapes your leadership style and the culture of the company?
Yeah. One of the things we start to think about it when the company grew is about the culture, like building what culture you want. You're gonna get a culture either way, so you better kind of work on it so you get it the way you are really true to your principles. We do the history presentation at every kickoff, which is 150 slide now and people cry. There's like white papers on tears, and I think that's just like remembering it, like your where we started. So everybody has that awareness, and then that keeps us really with the foot in the ground at the end of the day. I think if you are like the Coca-Cola, it's okay. You sell the same sugar water for the next 100 years. You just change some packaging in and there. But if you are in the technology space, those waves change every 3-5 years. So you always have to keep innovating. And to keep innovating, I think at the core of that, you have to be very curious. And you have a company of curiosity and low ego. And the curiosity drives low ego, challenging the status quo, always innovating, always rethinking things, because you have the curiosity, you never settle. So we were making sure that the whole company knows that the most important aspect of having building an endurance company, it's about building a curious organization. And that's why we do it.
That's fantastic. I guess my last question for you is this. Every great CEO is known for a lot of different characteristics, and people often ask me about what are yours, and I always say, like, he is the most resilient and adaptable CEO that I know in my portfolio, probably most that I've ever worked with. A lot of young entrepreneurs come to you for advice, especially ones that come from Europe. When they're starting that journey, given what your first principles are, what advice do you give them?
don't start.
Let's not do that. I'd be out of business if that was the case.
But I do in a way, like, are you sure you want to do this? It's minimum 10 years, right? And you have to give it all your life and all everything at it. And so making sure that you had the energy to really give it all you've got. I mean, if you lose, fine, but you want to lose because after you really give it everything you've got, not for other reasons. So that's what I always talk to the founders. And always I say, I think actually Bill Gates says all the time, which is we tend to overestimate what we can do in the short term, and we tend to underestimate what we can do in the longer terms. And that's kind of really when entrepreneurs start in the little garage, it's really that things always are going to take longer than what you think. But if you stick at it and you keep going and you keep going, at the end, I think that's the ultimate superhuman power. It's carrying on and carry on.
That's fantastic advice. Thank you, Aghi. Thank you. I think one of the things you're also known for is being quite competitive. So I think we're going to move to some interesting competitive activities now, if I'm not mistaken.
Let's do it.
Is that in?
It's in. It's in.
I can go everywhere.
Look at the runway. Look at the runway. So that's 1 point, 2 point, 3 points.
Correct.
It's a pipa.
Woo! Above it.
It's really hard. Boo! He went slow this time. Not aggressive.
Yes, here we are, the Index Trophy. We are the champions. I knew we would win it all along the way. Aghi, it's nice to have you. Of course, you can always come back and lose again.
Thank you.
Okay, good.